Chapter 4. I returned immediately to my training schedule. I didn't lay off at all. Twice a day, religiously, I put everything else out of my mind and did my workouts. Other things began happening for me, things that would eventually affect the shape of my whole life. The man who owned the health club I had been managing suddenly announced he was ready to get out of the gymnasium business. He wanted to continue only publishing his magazine and manufacturing protein. He offered the business to me first. It was the perfect opportunity. I would be able to train and be independent. I couldn't ask for anything better. But I didn't have the money to buy the equipment. I could borrow some of it, but not enough. I was not established enough to go to a bank, and my friends had almost no money. I knew somehow I had to find the money. And I did, managing other clubs, selling food supplements, giving private lessons, and doing whatever odd jobs I could pick up. With these and the sums I was able to borrow from friends, I was finally able to scrape together enough to buy the gym equipment. Even then, things did not let up. I still had the loans to repay, and there were improvements that had to be made in the gym. It was a struggle, a hell of a struggle. I didn't let my family know about these troubles. They had no idea what was going on. They were upset about my going from the army to Munich, leaving home to manage a gymnasium, and refusing to go on to school and prepare myself for some respectable profession. They called me periodically and wrote letters. They asked when I was going to get a real job, when I was going to become stable. "Is this what we raised?" they asked. "A bum? How long will you go on training all day in a gymnasium and living in a dream world?" I endured all this negative thinking. Every time I visited home for a holiday, my mother would take me aside and say, "Why don't you listen to your father, Arnold? Use him as an example. Look what he's done with his life. He has accomplished things. He's with the police. He's respected." I let everything they said pass over my head. My thinking went totally beyond that, beyond jobs, beyond Austria and small-town respectability. I continued doing precisely what I knew I needed to do. In my mind, there was only one possibility for me, and that was to go to the top, to be the best. Everything else was just a means to that end. My parents had no idea how closely I was having to live during my early period in Munich, or they'd have been even more insistent. One thing that saved me was my interest in business. I had majored in it in high school. I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized I would have to have a good understanding of the mechanics of business in order to make my dreams profitable. I began putting this to use in Munich. I turned the publicity from having placed second in the Mr. Universe contest to attracting new members to my gym. In almost no time, I built the membership from 70 to 200. Then, shortly after I returned to Germany, I competed in a contest in Essen. Because of my performance at the Mr. Universe contest, I was treated as a Superman. I don't think the judges even bothered to look critically at me. I had the contest won the moment I walked through the door. Although it's not customary to do any measuring during a competition, one of the judges took out a tape and measured my arm, which was over 20 inches. That was it for him. That was all he was concerned about. I went back to Munich with still more coverage in the bodybuilding press. That brought an even bigger increase of membership in my gym. Things were finally beginning to look better. I could pay my debts and still have money left for myself. Later that fall, I received a letter from London asking if I would come to England to do an exhibition. Within days, another one came from Newcastle, one from Plymouth, one from Portsmouth, and another from Belfast, all asking me to do exhibitions. I was bewildered. What did they mean by exhibitions? I didn't understand that side of bodybuilding at all. The London letter was from Wag Bennett, who had been one of the Mr. Universe judges. He had invited me to his house for dinner after the contest was over and told me he liked my type of body more than Yorton's. He had, in fact, put me in first place. He had arranged the London show and had been instrumental in encouraging the other promoters on the English circuit to invite me. He informed me that he and his family would like to help, to advise me on my posing routine. I remembered that I'd felt comfortable with Bennett and wrote back to accept his offer. I flew to London a few days prior to the exhibition. Wag put me up in his house and proceeded to teach me to pose to music. At first I was indignant. I had won second place in the Mr. Universe contest. I thought, what makes him think he can show me how to pose? It was a stupid, arrogant reaction. The truth is, I could not have had a better or more understanding teacher. Wag Bennett had been judging contests for many years and knew a great deal about what was impressive both to judges and to an audience. In the living room, he gave me some initial instruction about what constituted effective posing. I didn't want to take off my shirt. I wanted to wait and surprise him with how much I had improved since the contest the month before. When I did strip down to my trunks, he was impressed, and he said it was all the more reason to put together a dynamic posing routine using music. I was totally confused by his suggestion that I pose to music. I didn't have an ear for music, and I didn't like the semi-classical stuff he said I ought to use. At the time, I thought anything old or classical was boring, a waste of time. I liked up-to-date music, something popular, with a beat, something that moved. He explained that for the purpose of the exhibition, I had to use more complex music, which had depth and texture. The record he felt would give me the range I needed was the soundtrack from the movie Exodus. Wag explained something I understood, but had never bothered to formulate myself. Bodybuilding was show business, especially in its advanced stages of competition and exhibition. If I expected to make it big in the field, I had to become a showman. Naturally, that argument sold me. He put on the music from Exodus. At first, I was embarrassed. I had to laugh. I couldn't pose to that. He urged me to try. He showed me how to hit the best, most dramatic poses during the high points of the music, and how to do the less dramatic, more subtle poses during the quieter parts. He taught me to move and turn with rhythm and flow. He brought out photographs of other bodybuilders in action and ran films of them posing. He explained why some of them worked and others didn't. After 2 days, I ended up with an entirely different posing routine. In the beginning, I'm not sure Wag thought I would be able to do it. As big as I was, and as uncertain, I imagine I looked clumsy and slow. Plus, I probably showed very little progress. I'm never that good when I practice anything. It's only when I'm really doing it, when it has to count, that I turn on, which happened in London at the first exhibition. The moment I stepped out on stage, everything fell into place. The results amazed me. It all happened as Wag had predicted. The people applauded when the music was up, and when it was down, they were quiet. The whole thing worked. After I'd finished, the audience kept cheering and applauding, and I realized the music had done it. Before, my posing had been like a silent film, and now it was a sound film. It gave me a whole new dimension. The lights were special to create shadows on the body. The music starting and stopping dramatically. I felt as though I were having something created for me, something very satisfying. I was up on a pedestal with 2,000 people watching, and I felt great. That night, I signed autographs for the first time. I couldn't believe it. People crowded around me and shoved papers in my hand. I didn't know what to do with them. "Sign them," cried Wag. "They want your autograph." What a feeling that was to write Arnold Schwarzenegger across the program. All of a sudden, I was a star. Now bodybuilding did become show business for me. I bought Exodus and took it everywhere I went. I acted like a real professional, bringing my own music, telling the stage manager what lights to use and when to open and close the curtains. That's my style. As soon as I grasp something, I take control. The response to these exhibitions throughout Great Britain was fabulous. The Dutch heard about them and asked me to come to Holland. They didn't want just any bodybuilder. Even though I was a newcomer, they wanted Arnold. It had to do with having a big body, being spectacular. People could identify more closely with a huge body than with a perfect body. In those days, a perfect body was too advanced. People could relate to hugeness, to the animal spectacle of a big guy. They called me the Giant of Austria and the Austrian Oak. Articles read, if Hercules were to be born today, his name would be Arnold Schwarzenegger. Chapter 4. I did an exhibition in Holland, one in Belgium, then went back to England. I was paid 100 marks plus expenses for each exhibition. It was almost nothing, but I was happy. I still had no money to speak of, but I was young. I knew there was money in my future. I was getting experience doing these exhibitions. I learned all the little gimmicks, that I should smile, not look too serious, oil myself carefully, and limit the number of poses to keep the fans shouting for more. I was becoming a pro. Already my actions were beyond my years and experience. I was growing so fast, moving ahead and becoming so suddenly famous in bodybuilding that I could barely watch what was happening to me. I trained hard that whole year. I kept training the same way, using the split routine, which I was no longer doing out of necessity. Now, a lot of other bodybuilders started following this routine. American magazines wrote about the split routine as if it were my secret. It became the big thing. Everybody thought that was how I'd grown as much as I had in such a short time. Although the gym was a burden, I could see that it would be profitable. I struggled through, paying my debts, making ends meet. I started having a good time in Munich. I met some bodybuilders who were serious about training. I was becoming a star, being interviewed and photographed, and I let that go to my head. I was young, full of energy, and began running wild. I got into powerlifting and trained with Franco Columbu. I turned Franco onto bodybuilding, and he turned me on to powerlifting, onto heavy resistance training, which is different from bodybuilding. I liked the idea of really pressing a lot of weight, so I started competing in powerlifting events. Besides the ego satisfaction I got from working with heavy weights, it gave my body more mass, which I still felt I needed. It was an idea I couldn't get out of my head. I was doing heavy squats, heavy bench presses, and this provided some of the foundation work of my body, which has always made me appear strong. Certain bodybuilders lack that look. They have good bodies, but they don't appear powerful. The reason is inadequate foundation training. Good early training shows up in the muscles around the spine. There is really no exercise for those muscles. Their development is just an indication that you have put in some heavy groundwork, heavy squats and heavy deadlifts, a lot of lifting and rowing. I had done these exercises from the start. I developed strong basic muscles, which gave me the powerful look people wanted to see. Reg Park had been a powerlifter. He had done squats with 600 pounds, bench presses with 500 pounds, and deadlifts of over 700 pounds. I saw no reason why I shouldn't continue in the same groove. I won the German championships in heavyweight powerlifting before I stopped. My body weight was up to 250, and I convinced myself that it was time to chisel down to start getting more quality in my body. I met Reg Park in January of 1967. After winning second in the Mr. Universe contest, I began writing letters to him. Before that, when I was just a young bodybuilder, a nobody, I hadn't been sure he would bother to answer, but now he did write back, saying he had indeed heard of me and was looking forward to meeting me sometime. He said he was doing a show in London at the beginning of the year and suggested that we might meet then. I wrote to Wag Bennett and asked if there was any way I could do the exhibition with Reg Park. I remember training in the gym in London and hearing he would be arriving there in an hour. I kept training and getting more and more excited. I was like a child. I was going to meet my idol for the first time. I felt giddy. I increased the weight on the barbell. I looked at myself in the mirror. I kept working, as if I could finish my body before he arrived. I wanted to be pumped up. I wanted to be at my best. I was very nervous about it. My mind was churning. Then he walked in the door. It was really incredible seeing my idol for the first time. I recall having this foolish, self-conscious smile on my face. I just kept looking at him and smiling, almost like when a girl has a crush on a boy and she doesn't know what to say. She just has this smile on her face. I was absolutely speechless. I was afraid to talk. I didn't know how to approach him, what to say. I wanted to say only the right things. I wanted his attention, his approval of my body, his compliments, which I got. But it must have been strange for him. I ran around like an excited little kid, looking at his muscles, trying to talk to him, which was difficult, since at the time I still didn't know English well. But we had a beautiful communication going, without really having to say very much. For so many years, Reg Park had been part of my life. Now I could finally train with him, watch him. He was famous for certain muscles I didn't have, such as calves, deltoids, and abdominals. These are the major muscles one needs to look really Herculean. That's when I cut out the nonsense and started getting his whole program down. I went with Reg on the entire exhibition trip, to Ireland, to Manchester, and the different cities in England. We had the same kind of body, tall and wide and huge, and this was appealing to a large audience. At the first exhibition, he introduced me to the audience, saying that as far as he was concerned, I was the next Mr. Universe. In a few years, I was going to be the greatest thing bodybuilding had ever seen. I traveled with Reg Park for a week. I watched and learned a lot. One inspiring thing was that his body turned in the same way mine did. We both liked the heavy workouts with barbell sets, and not as much with dumbbells. It was fantastic having Reg Park as a training partner, working with me, standing above me to help if a weight was too heavy, or I cramped up from too many reps. I'm sure I wore him out during the tour. There were so many things to talk about that still seemed mysterious, such as how different bodybuilders had to do different exercises for different body parts. According to Reg, the reason was bone structure. It was obvious, for example, that a guy with short legs had to do fewer squats because his legs would fill up much faster, which was why I should never squat with a short guy. My long legs required more squats, more weight. Working with Reg Park for that short time helped more than anything to clear up the little confusions I had about the principles of other champions. I learned that you can't really say, you must do this to get such and such a result. You have to try out certain things and find out what is best for your own body. I collected advice from Reg the whole time. I wrote it all down to take back to Munich and use as it seemed to serve me best. In the end, he promised he would invite me to South Africa the next year to do an exhibition with him, but he said it was contingent upon my winning Mr. Universe the coming year. He thought I would win for sure if I worked hard. Back at the gym, I trained almost totally according to Reg Park's principles and system. Keep the exercises simple. There were certain moves he did that were different from mine, and I adopted them. I knew that in the coming year, I had to be super critical. I had to analyze and work on my faults harder than ever before. I discovered that taking measurements gave me both satisfaction and incentive. I measured my calves, arms, and thighs regularly, and I'd be turned on if I saw I'd increased an 1/8 inch or a 1/2 inch. On a calendar, I kept even fractional changes in measurements and weight. I had a photographer take pictures at least once a month. I studied each shot with a magnifying glass. I hung around people who were aware of physical shape and who could continually give me compliments. Suddenly, I was up all the time. My confidence soared. Meeting Reg Park helped me in a number of ways. One was to make me want to become a better person. There was a funny period I went through, which began about the time I was 19. I'd become fully developed physically, weighing between 240 and 250 pounds. I'd begun to get a lot of notoriety, and I started feeling superior to everyone. I think that when you're almost up to the top, but not quite there, it's easy to be carried away with what you imagine to be your own importance. I was pretty ego-oriented anyway. I already felt I was better than anyone else. I felt as if I were a Superman or something. That was my attitude. Macho. I was strong, and I walked the streets feeling and acting tough. If someone made the slightest remark or gave me trouble, I would hit them over the head. I was aggressive and rude. I'd go into a beer hall where we ate dinner after training and start a fight for no reason at all. It was a bad time. Now, looking back on it, I'm embarrassed. I was nothing more than a punk, a big bully throwing my weight around. I had fights almost every day. It might be in the train station with an Italian or a Greek, or it might be in front of a girl, just to show off what kind of a man I was. I made a lot of trouble, got in scrapes with the police, drove crazily, collected handfuls of speeding tickets. They were all connected with my need to emphasize my masculinity, my superior size and strength. But when I'd finished my tour with Reg and built up the momentum of my training schedule for the Mr. Universe contest, I grew more and more satisfied with my progress and became aware of how good my body was, how good I was. Then gradually, I could allow myself to admit how bad I was in other areas. The more I won, the more I started feeling like a human being again, just a normal guy. I became so content to work hard and drive myself to the top that the whole business of fighting and acting out the macho role went away. In the space of a month, it was gone. I suddenly knew who I was. But in a way, I think it was important for me to have gone through this period early, because I could look back, see how stupid the tough guy stuff was, and not waste any more of my life. The whole point of the tough guy business was just to psych myself up, have another way of telling myself I was great. It was part of the winning trip. I'm great. I'm the greatest. I was continuously trying to convince myself of it. In fact, I did it so well, I forgot there was another life besides the life of a bodybuilder, besides my life. I was trying to prove something, because I was frustrated, because I was still not the best. I use a perfect example in the book Pumping Iron. When you have a BMW, which drives well, although it's not a great car, you try to race with everybody to prove that it has speed. But when you have a Ferrari or a Lamborghini, you know you can beat anybody on the street. You don't race anymore. You start driving 55 on the freeway. Anybody can pass you, and you know that if you step on the gas, they're gone. You know how good you are. You don't have to prove it anymore. It was the same for that period in my life. I wanted to think I was the greatest bodybuilder, but I wasn't. Not yet. Not even in my mind. That's why I had to spend every minute trying to prove it. My life changed in other areas. For the first time ever, I had a steady girlfriend. It was the first stable relationship I'd had in a long time. It made training easier and calmed me down. I no longer had to prove through rudeness how